An astonishing and horrible thing has been committed in the land. The prophets prophesy falsely, and the priests rule by their own power. And my people love to have it so. But what will you do in the end? And that's a big question I want to focus on here, is because in this specifically, this is Jeremiah 5, 30, and 31. And I just started Jeremiah a couple days ago. I do a couple chapters a day. And what was really interesting to me, especially that stuck out at the very end there, is, but what will you do in the end? Because we are living in a time right now where it is incredibly similar to this. And so in Jeremiah, Scripture is talking about the justice of God's judgment upon Israel. And so if you think about it, Israel, God's chosen people, but also humanity, God's chosen people. He wants the best for each and every one of us. However, it is ultimately up to us because we have free will to choose if we want that for ourselves or not. And I think the way that this verse ended, the last sentence here, the last question, but what will you do in the end, is a great representation that we ultimately have free will. God has an incredible plan for all of us, but it is up to us whether we're going to live up to that plan or not. And so you can get into that argument between, predestination, predetermination, and free will. But it's a beautiful mix of both that we will never be able to understand. And we can kind of grasp it, right? The way that I like to look at it personally, that helps me wrap my head around it, is God has a plan for us. He wants the best for us. He's like a parent, right? Has a plan, wants the best for you, does everything that they can to help you succeed. A good parent does the best and sets you up for success, but it's ultimately up to you whether you live up to that or not, because we have free will. And so that's the way that I've always been able to wrap my head around that. And I am not into theology. I am not a Bible scholar, nothing like that at all. I'm just a regular dude. But that is how I wrap my head around that concept. So, in this verse, in Jeremiah 5, 30 and 31, and, just so far, the beginning book of Jeremiah has been talking about the impending destruction of Israel because of their continuous disobedience towards God. And we see that so much, right? Like I started this longer than that now. It is January, end of January, and I started in May. I started going through the whole Bible from beginning to end, and I'm 60% of the way through right now. So it'll be just over a year when I finish that. And so in the entire Old Testament that I've gone through, 60-ish%, it's literally the same theme over and over again. It's this, it's this crazy cycle of God giving them a clear path to follow that will lead to success and well-being and safety. And then they start to stray, worship other gods, create idols. And then he's like, okay, well, I'm going to let you guys get captured, or I'm going to let you wander in the desert, or I'm going to let you, all of these things. And then they're like, God, why are you doing this to us? You need to save us. Why are you doing it? We're going to die out here, right? And then he delivers them from that, and they're all happy. And then they quickly forget, within a generation or two, what God had done for them, and they're back to that again. And I think that's an incredibly beautiful and perfect example of how we live our lives. Because we beg for God in the lows, and then we forget about him in the highs. And that is a really, really hard place to be, right? So instead, I think if we can change our view about this, about our dependence on God, and if we can learn to rely on him in the lows and have gratitude, be thankful in the highs, whatever vocabulary term you choose, in the highs, right? So be thankful for the highs and rely on him in the lows. Instead of currently what most of us do, what I always do, what I catch myself doing, is begging and wondering in the lows and then forgetting about him in the highs. Because lows and highs are how life is made up. If life was just flatline, then you'd be flatline and you'd be dead. It's exactly why it doesn't work like that, right? Life is supposed to be ups and downs. It's not supposed to be straight, because that would be boring. That would be no way to live, right? An exceptional life is going to be full of exceptionally high highs and exceptionally low lows. But we have this unrealistic expectation that we should just be somewhat normal or average. And in my opinion, that is way worse. That is way worse. I would rather, even though it sucks, I would rather experience the low lows to also be able to feel and experience the high highs and have the lessons from the lows and have the experience and the wisdom from the highs than just being average. So, with all that to say, let's tie it back into exactly or what is said here in scripture at the end of Jeremiah. Turn off my notifications there. Discord messages. So, I'm going to read it again, 30 and 31. An astonishing and horrible thing has been committed in the land. The prophets prophesy falsely, and the priests rule by their own power. And my people love to have it so. But what will you do in the end? So, this is incredibly relevant, I think, to today's society, especially here in America, where horrible things are happening in the land. The prophets prophesy falsely. The priests rule by their own power, right? We have leaders in politics, in religious aspects as well, and even leaders in heads of families, where they are, essentially drunk and reliant on their own power. And we have prophets prophesying falsely. That comes into play with even something as simple as we have now, which is just quite obviously wrong, is the LGBTQ agenda, the Rainbow Club agenda in churches, in these organizations, and we let it get into our government and into our families and into our schools. And that doesn't mean that has to be outcasted or anything like that, is not what I'm saying. Those people still are human. They still deserve, unless they genetically modify themselves and they're technically not human anymore. That's a story for another time. It doesn't mean that they deserve less or anything like that at all. We should still be accepting of, or I should say we should still be welcoming, but at the end of the day, we should not be accepting of it, because that is wrong. So, that's a pretty obvious example. Another less obvious example would be a female pastor of a church. Personally and scripturally, I also do believe that is wrong. Now, you being able to have a female leader in kids ministries and all that makes sense, because you need a motherly figure who is going to run that the best, better than any man ever could. And there's a reason for that. It's biological. It's the way God made us. So that makes sense. That, as far as I'm concerned, is scriptural and correct. But when you have a female pastor leading a group of adults, leading a group of men and women, is not correct. If you have a female leader leading a women's ministry, that's fine. Once again, my opinion and my interpretation of Scripture, and I believe that is scripturally true, scripturally accurate, and scripturally fact. So my point here is that with these things, we hear these things, we see these things happen. Prophets prophesying falsely, priests ruling by their own power, people doing whatever they want in the name of religion, in the name of God, which is false. And the people love to have it so. But what will you do in the end? Meaning, everybody seems to love it. But you doing nothing in the end is partially on your hands. And that's why I'm making this video. Because I can say that I did something about it. Whenever those topics come up, I voice my opinion on it. I voice my opinion and truth on it. Because people need to hear that. Because people need to hear the truth. Because everything now is so full of lies and deception and prophets prophesying falsely and priests ruling by their own power. And the people love it. But what are you going to do about it? Something to chew on. And I know what I'm going to be doing about it. I'll be using whatever platform I have to do something about it. And what will you do about it? Doesn't matter if you have big, small, just talking to a friend, it doesn't matter. The question is what are you going to do about it? So, that is what I have for you today.